Today marks 1 week since the horrific anti-Semitic attack on the Adas Yisrael community here in Melbourne. And while the community is still reeling, we've seen politicians visit the site, Prime Minister, ministers of government, premiers, and pledge to put an end to antisemitism, which is unconscionable and intolerable in our state and in our country at large. They've offered money to the Jewish community to provide security and have said that they would tackle antisemitism as a serious issue. However, this seems to be lip service, but because behind that the government has failed to stocktake on their decisions, on their foreign policy matters and positions with regards to the conflict in Eretz Yisrael in our current time, where Israel is fighting an existential war against Hamas, an enemy which has sworn to destroy the Jewish people and to perpetrate many, many more October 7th, God forbid. This week in the United Nations, a resolution was passed calling for an unequivocal, unconditional ceasefire in Gaza. Effectively, what this means is that Israel is no longer able to go and fight against Hamas, to uproot the evil that sits on our border. It means that Hamas is able to regroup and, God forbid, perpetuate and perpetrate future attacks on our people. And amongst those nations, which include the most terrible anti-Semitic regimes in the world, the Australian government, as an expression of their policies, decided to support that resolution. It is such decisions in foreign policy which have demonized Israel that have led to the climate that allows anti-Semitism to thrive in our country, that is able to turn anti-Israel sentiment into anti-Jewish sentiment, so that protests which were allowed to take place in the city, protests where people cried out, "Gas the Jews" or "Where the Jews," has now allowed that to progress, where not only we've seen protests out synagogues, but now we've actually seen the destruction of synagogues as well. So how do we respond? In this week's parsha, we read about Yaakov returning to the Holy Land to face his brother Esav. And the commentaries tell us that Yaakov represents the Jewish people and Esav represents the nations of the world, the hostile nations of the world, the anti-Semitic nations of the world, who, like Esav wanted to kill Yaakov, want to destroy the Jewish people. So if we look at how Yaakov prepared himself to meet Esav, we can glean some insight as to what our position should be when we face anti-Semitism and when we need to address the government decisions that are so appalling in our midst. Rashi brings from the words of our sages that Yaakov prepared himself for three things: l'doiron, for a gift; l'tfilah, for prayer; and l'milchama, to fight. What does this mean practically? Well, sometimes the approach has to be l'doiron. Sometimes we need to take an approach of appeasement. Sometimes we do need to pander, placate, and garner favor from international bodies, the nations of the world, and our own governments. However, that is only so far as that it serves our interests and furthers our protection. First and foremost, we need to pray. We need to know that the protection of the Jewish people is in the hands of the Almighty, the great shepherd who protects the sheep that sits amongst the 70 wolves. He is the great guardian of Israel who neither slumbers or sleeps, and we need to turn to him and only rely on him for our protection. But then we need to fight. And to fight does not only mean to engage in combat to destroy our enemies who rise up against us, but it also means to stand strong, to not cower, to not buckle in the face of pressure, to demand action by those who are obligated to protect us, our police forces, our government institutions, all the way up to the hierarchy, and to condemn resolutions and decisions that our government makes that are to our detriment, to make bold steps and courageous steps that express the Go'en Yaakov, the pride of the Jewish people. Another thing that the Torah tells us is that Yaakov sent a message to Esav, "Im Lavan Garti, I dwelled with Lavan." And the word Garti, as Rashi brings, has the gematria, the numerical value of 613. What Yaakov was telling Esav is that I've kept the 613 commandments. And the question is, why would Esav care? Esav was a rasha, Esav was a wicked person. Esav had no interest in the spiritual. Esav had no concern for Torah mitzvahs. So what is Yaakov hoping to achieve by telling Esav that he has successfully kept the commandments of the Torah? So perhaps what Yaakov is sending is a message of Jewish pride, that I am proud of my identity as a Jew. I am proud that I'm connected to Torah, that I'm connected to mitzvahs. Whether you care about it or not is insignificant. It's a declaration, an affirmation of who I am, what I stand for, what I believe in, what I represent. And therefore, when I come to you, I'm not coming as a cowering Jew who wants to hide their Jewishness, but I'm coming as a strong, proud Jew, committed to my Jewish identity, committed to my Jewish observance, committed to my heritage. And with that, I come to you. And just as ultimately Esav made peace with Yaakov in that moment, so too when we go with strength, when we go with faith, we too will Be'ezras Hashem see peace in our times, with the ultimate peace being the time when the nations of the world who are hostile to the Jewish people, the anti-Semitic peoples of the world, will meet their end with the coming of Mashiach Be'ezras Hashem.